Hi, my name is Trevor Messiah from Rock & Sun. Today we're going to be looking at how to set up a top rope anchor for sport climbing. So, what is a top rope anchor and why do we need to set one up? Okay, so what I've got here is an example of what you might find on an outdoor crag. Now, if you come from an indoor climbing background, the anchors can be very, very different. So you never know what you're going to see on the crag. It could be something like this, or it could just be two bolts that aren't linked at all with a chain. So what we're going to look at is how to deal with the differences that you might find and how to set up a top rope anchor so that we can protect the anchor from wear and tear. Now we can see quite clearly on this one that it's quite badly worn. So the last person to lower off this must have been quite happy to do so, and it's questionable as to whether they should have been or not. With a top rope anchor, what we're going to do is put our own equipment onto the in situ bolts or whatever's there so that we're wearing our own equipment that can be taken off rather than wearing out the in situ equipment, which obviously costs and takes time to replace. So what we're going to do is we're going to get up on the crag and we're going to show you a variety of different ways of setting up an anchor. Timing. Okay, so I've arrived at my anchor. I'm going to clip in with a quick draw there into that bolt and tight. Okay, so got a quick draw on that bolt here, and I'm going to now put a screw gate onto this one. And I'll just need a little bit of slack and I'll clip the rope into that as well, so I'm on both bolts. And now I can lock the gate. Okay, so tight. When you get to your sport anchor, you don't really know sometimes what you're going to find. So on this occasion, I have two bolts. They're not separated by a chain, they're not linked with a chain. So therefore, what I've done is I've clipped into one with a quick draw, and then I've clipped into the other one with a locking screw gate. And what I've also done is opposed the gates, just for a little bit of extra safety. When you've got a locking screw gate on there, it's not necessary, but you may as well have the gates facing opposite directions so there's no chance of this coming undone and then any of them unclipping. So what we have on these bolts are a mayon and a ring. And as we saw previously, we saw the wear on that carabiner that was a fixed piece of gear on a previous anchor. Now, with this one, we would have the problem of the mayon also wearing. Of course, we could flip the mayon over, perhaps, so it wouldn't wear so much, or we can share the wear on either end. But with the ring, because it will move freely, what you have is the opportunity it will move, so every time you lower off on the ring, it's going to be wearing a slightly different part. So I've seen rings that have been on anchors for 20 years plus and hardly show any signs of wear. We can see a little bit shine there where the rope's been, but it won't actually start to wear a groove in the ring. It's very rare to see that if the ring is able to move freely. So it's a fairly cheap system and one that's very easy to maintain. So this is a good way to set up a top rope system or just a system for lowering off when you have this setup. So I will be lowering off my own equipment. The only time that we'll be lowering off the in situ protection is the last person. The last person will have to come up, thread the anchor, clean off your own equipment, and then the anchor will be used just one time for your party or your group, rather than multiple people either top roping off of the fixed equipment or lowering off repeatedly. So in this situation, there isn't a chain. And the reason they don't need to be linked is because you're just having body weight on the anchors. The bolts are strong enough to hold a minimum of 22 kilonewtons. Your attachment point is well below both bolts. So if one bolt were to fail, this one would immediately be holding the weight and you would get maybe a slight swing, but it wouldn't create any shock load. Your rope is also acting as a shock absorber, and that's what it's designed to do. So the rope will stretch, and that is an important part of your safety chain. So you don't need to create anything complicated with slings, because effectively we've got the same system here with a quick draw and a screw gate. It could of course be two quick draws instead of a screw gate, but there's an extra bit of safety that the screw gate affords. I don't tend to have a specific quick draw setup that I put on my anchors. I just tend to use them as I wish, and I have a variety of different lengths to take care of the distances between the bolts. What I do tend to find is that I have, because I always use a screw gate, it's usually the screw gate that's holding most of the weight, and those do show signs of wear, and then it's a case of looking at your equipment and knowing when to replace it, when it's starting to show signs of wear, or when you become less confident when you look at your equipment. That's usually a sign that it's time to replace it. I often get asked this question is, when do I replace this bit of gear? And I'm like, you're asking the question. Your life is worth more than the cost of that rope or that carabiner. If you're not confident in it, just replace it. So of course this anchor happens to be halfway up a cliff. Sometimes you'll come across cliffs that might have access from the top, so you could walk around and you might be able to access the bolts without having to make yourself, put yourself at risk. So therefore you could use this system in a very similar way, depending on the distance between the bolts. Normally, this is a fairly standard kind of distance you might find. So this system will usually work, when you have access to the bolts from the top. So that's us all set up. So, okay, lower away. So we've had a look at how and why we might want to set up a top rope anchor, how to put our own equipment on the anchor that we might find at the top of a sport route, and we looked at why and how we should be doing that. But it's important to remember that these videos are no substitute for first-hand instruction by a professional. So these are meant to support your previous knowledge and also act as a reminder of what you might have been taught on a course with someone who is suitably qualified to teach you how to safely take part in the activity of sport climbing. Okay, so 3 takeaways from here is try not to use in-situ gear so that we're not wearing it out. The second would be make sure that you inspect the gear before you clip into it. As we've seen with gear that's badly worn, people sometimes just assume that the gear is in good condition. So take a look at it and try and make an assessment of whether you think the gear is safe before you use it. And also just respect other users as well. If you are setting up a top rope, just remember that other people might want to use that route that you're top roping. You can always pull the rope, let someone else climb through, and then set it up again if you need to. So just be courteous when you're at the crag.